Hi guys, thank you for clicking on this video. We got a big win for President Trump. The Supreme Court rejected Prosecutor Jack Smith's request to hear the Trump immunity case. And this is good news for Trump. Let me set this up for you. Trump has a total of 4 cases, 2 state level and 2 in the federal courts. The 2 state level cases are Georgia, where Trump called Georgia and asked them to count every legal vote. Apparently that's a crime now. And New York, where corrupt Alvin Bragg ignores the rapists and the murderers and decides to go after Trump for a bookkeeping entry. The 2 other cases are federal, the documents case in Mar-a-Lago and the case in Washington, D.C., where Trump was just indicted on 4 counts of conspiracy. Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith as prosecutor to oversee those 2 federal cases. Trump was indicted on August 3rd in the Washington, D.C. case, with a trial date set for Monday, March 4th. That's a very important date. We're going to get back to that later. Trump's legal team is claiming immunity, saying the president cannot be prosecuted for any official acts, which makes sense because if the president has to answer to court for performing his official duties, then he's not really the president. We would love to bring Biden in front of a court and go after him criminally or at least civilly and sue him for some of the stuff that he's done to our country, but we're not allowed. As long as the president is acting within his official duties, that office really is above the law. That's why presidents are allowed to pardon people. Trump's legal team made this argument to the judge in this case, Tanya Chutkan, and she said no. Just because the president is immune from civil litigation doesn't mean that he's immune from criminal prosecution. Immunity does not apply to personal, unofficial acts outside of the president's normal duties. Trump cannot go out and shoot someone and not expect to be prosecuted. And Trump's legal team responds by saying, well, he didn't go out and shoot someone. The issue at hand is election integrity. And Trump, as president of the United States, not only has a right to comment on those elections, but he has an obligation to ensure that those elections are carried out in a fair and honest manner. It didn't matter. Tanya didn't want to hear it, so she denied that claim. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Normally, her decision would be appealed to the next highest court, which in this case would be the Court of Appeals. If Trump gets a denial there, then he would appeal to the highest court, the Supreme Court of the United States. But all of that would take time, and they won't make their March 4th deadline. So Jack Smith, the prosecutor, jumped over the Court of Appeals and went directly to the Supreme Court and asked them if they could expedite this case and if they'd be willing to hear it. Thankfully, the Supreme Court denied that request and said, no, Jack, get back in line and follow the normal process. Now, the Supreme Court didn't give an opinion. They only provided one simple line that said this request was denied. So we don't know how the justices voted or what they considered that may have influenced their decision. However, there was a brief submitted on behalf of Trump, and I want to go through it with you because I think it may have influenced them. Now, remember, jumping over the Court of Appeals and going directly to the Supreme Court is not something that is normally done. Jack Smith would have to prove that there is a public need for immediate action. He would need to prove those 2 things, that it affects the public a great deal and it needs to be decided immediately. The example the brief gives is the steel seizure case from the 1950s. During the Korean War, where steel production was crucial, steel workers decided to go on strike. Now, without steel, we don't win the war. We have no guns, we have no ammo, we have no tanks. So the government came in and seized the steel mills. A lower court got an injunction against the federal government and said, you can't do that. You can't come in and seize private property. In that case, that was appealed to the Supreme Court because they said, listen, this obviously affects the public. Our soldiers are going to die. And you really need to decide on this immediately because people are actually dying on the battlefield. That's an immediate need, right? And in that case, the Supreme Court took the case and made a ruling in just 9 days. That's an example of a public need, fighting the war, and an immediate action. We need to know this quickly because without steel, we're going to lose. People will die. That's the example they give. You want to know Jack Smith's example? Jack Smith says, it's of imperative public importance that the respondent's claim of immunity be resolved immediately so that if the claim is rejected, President Trump's trial can proceed as promptly as possible. Is that not a joke? You're not really providing a reason. You're just relying on your own conclusion to justify the premise of your argument. And that's exactly what Jack Smith did here. We need to know immediately so that if you tell us no, Trump can be prosecuted promptly. Compare that to the Korean War case that we just talked about, where people would literally die if this case wasn't decided in time. Jack Smith goes on to say, the ordinary process may not result in a final decision for many months, which might prevent this court from hearing and deciding the case this term. Why the rush, Jack? I mean, why does it have to be this term? The government waited more than 2.5 years to even bring this case, and now all of a sudden we need to rush? Why? I mean, we know why. It's because Trump is leading in all the polls and he's going to be the Republican nominee. But the reasons you give are a joke. But Jack Smith says, yeah, but this case is at the center of the January 6th insurrection, an event that has been compared to the Civil War and 9/11. So it's of significant importance. Okay. But there are other January 6th defendants waiting in jail for 3 years, and they haven't even gotten a trial date. And in some of those cases, the government has asked to postpone it even further. So that's not the reason. Jack Smith says, yeah, but we have a trial date, March 4th, and we need to keep that trial date. But as the brief points out, every case has a trial date. So what's the real reason, Jack? The brief goes on to say, the trial schedule coincidence with the presidential primaries has not been lost on the public or the press. Devoid of argument, the petition practically begs the public and the court to consider the political consequences. And President Biden's own remarks at the start of this investigation did not help. Asked how to reassure foreign leaders that the former president will not return, the current president responded, well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power if he does run. I'm making sure he, on the legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again. Biden did say that. I found the tape. Here it is.
Your predecessor is about to launch another campaign. So how do you reassure them, if that is the reason for their questioning, that the former president will not return, or that his political movement, which is still very strong, will not once again take power in the United States?
Well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power by, if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again.
I'm making sure that he does not become the next president again? And what do you mean you're using the Constitution to demonstrate or prove that he shouldn't be allowed to run? Using the Constitution as in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? You just revealed to the whole world, Joe, that you were working behind the scenes with Merrick Garland to prevent Trump from running if he decided to run. In fact, the New York Times reported that you pressured Merrick Garland to prosecute Trump. That press conference was November 9th. 6 days later, on November 15th, Trump announced that he was going to run again.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
On November 18th, 3 days after Trump announced, Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith as special prosecutor. And that is not a coincidence. We all know the only reason Trump is being prosecuted is because he's running for president. That is a fact. And if you don't believe me, listen to Merrick Garland.
The Department of Justice has long recognized that in certain extraordinary cases, it is in the public interest to appoint a special prosecutor to independently manage an investigation and prosecution. Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel.
You can't deny this anymore. Merrick Garland said, because he's running again, we have to prosecute him. And that's how the brief closed. The United States' demand for extraordinary and immediate relief is driven by partisan interest, not the public's interest. So this is good news for President Trump. Jack Smith tried to circumvent the lower court, but was denied by the Supreme Court. Now Trump could appeal this decision to the lower court first, and then if he loses that appeal, he could take it up to the Supreme Court and appeal it there. But that process takes a lot of time, so they're not going to make the March 4th deadline. And the reason why they wanted to have this case start on March 4th is because the following day, Tuesday, March 5th, is Super Tuesday. That's the day where 14 states hold their primary elections. 1/3 of all Republican delegates are decided on that particular day. If they have the trial starting the day before Super Tuesday, Trump has to spend at least a week in trial and he can't get out and campaign. Knowing that, listen to the media try to spin this, that Super Tuesday isn't a big deal.
In Washington, a date has been set for former President Donald Trump's federal case related to his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results.
During a court hearing yesterday, U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan announced that the trial will begin March 4th of next year, one day before Super Tuesday.
Why did the judge choose March 4th? Can you walk us through what happened?
You know why the judge chose March 4th? It's to keep him in trial so he can't go out and campaign. If this were a civil trial, then Trump doesn't have to appear. But because it's criminal, Trump has to be there every day, which is what they want. They don't want him out campaigning.
The judge made clear that 7 months, that moment between arraignment and this projected trial date, is sufficient. It's adequate for the defense to get ready.
7 months is sufficient. When you're in trial, there's something called discovery. The United States has to turn over every single document they have so the Trump team can prepare a defense. Every text message, email, every financial statement, anything that was said on TV, all of the minutes from the January 6th show trial, all of that needs to be turned over to the Trump team so they have a chance to examine it, go through it, and prepare the rebuttal. In this case, the government turned over 12,700,000 pages of documents. For a 7-month trial date, that's about 60,000 pages a day. Even if Trump had 10 attorneys working on this case, which he does not, can you read 6,000 pages a day? 7 months is not nearly enough.
She had made the argument that prosecutors had made while speaking in court, that the public has a right to a speedy trial too, not just the defendant.
The public does not have a right to a speedy trial. The defendant has a right to a speedy trial, and that's found in the 6th Amendment. The accused has a right to a speedy trial, not the public.
There is a time sensitivity to this case because of the scope and size of it, because of the nature of it, and because the judge said the defense has so many resources. This is not an indigent defendant. This is somebody who has a zealous and well-appointed defense team. He has the resources to go to trial soon.
I thought Trump was going to be treated like everyone else. Didn't you hear that? This isn't a witch hunt. We're going to treat Trump just like every other defendant. But yet she says, you're special, Mr. Trump, because you have a lot of attorneys. So we're not going to treat you like everyone else.
But what about this timing right before Super Tuesday? I mean, he's not just the defendant. He's somebody running, again, to be the president. Would the judge be considering or factoring in the political implications? Or is that just like not what her concern is?
Judge Tanya Chutkan made it explicit she is not going to consider the defendant's professional schedule, as she put it, or this campaign. She said in so many words, Trump is going to have to find the time to make this work in his schedule as any other criminal defendant would do.
Professional schedule? Are you kidding me? Whether you support President Trump or not, you should be outraged as an American. If you took out the words Donald Trump and put in Barack Obama, would you care then? I'm talking to the liberals. Because I would be upset no matter who the president is, because what they're doing is wrong. Merrick Garland and Joe Biden took the Constitution and threw it out the window just to get Trump. And the media not only ignores this, but they cover for them. It's disgusting. Anyway, that's all I have for you on this video. I appreciate you watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. It will motivate me to make more. Thank you again, and I hope to see you on the next one.